Yeah.
Okay. There's one of my fellow commissioners. Morning, Connie.
Good morning, Randy.
Connie, you want to introduce yourself to the other commissioners and to our experts today?
Sure. My name is Connie Chang. I'm the commissioner for ANC 34G District 5, and we work together on this resolution, and I'm very supportive of it. I'm happy to be here this morning.
We're getting a few more people joining us now. Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
How are you? You want to introduce yourself, Barbara?
Barbara Clark, 8802.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm Randy Speck. I'm the chair of ANC 34G, and I've been involved in the issue of lead in our water only for a very short time compared with the other guests who are joining us today. But I've been on what's called a stakeholder alliance for DC water. And that was where I met Valerie Barron, who's with us this morning. And we have been addressing some of the issues related to lead in our drinking water. This goes back a very, very long time. And I'm going to let Valerie and Paul Schwartz introduce themselves. Valerie, as I said, she's a former ANC commissioner and was on the Stakeholder Alliance with me. So Valerie, you want to introduce yourself and give a little bit of your background?
Sure. Well, it's really nice to see you all. Thanks for making the time this morning. As a former ANC commissioner, I know how many really important issues and invitations fly at your inbox every day. So we want to make really good use of your time. In addition to being a former ANC commissioner, I used to represent the very first ANC 1A01 in the northern edge of Columbia Heights on the border with Ward 4. I'm a senior attorney at the Natural Resources Defense Council, where I'm in the health group. So we cover drinking water among other issues. And I am on the DC Water Stakeholder Alliance with Randy. But I really got involved in this issue when DC Water came to my ANC. I was pregnant with my first child. My second one's crying in the background if you can hear him, but my husband got him, he's good. So DC Water came to my ANC and presented the plans for what they were doing, and what they were doing, I knew through my day job, was actually making water quality worse. It was creating additional lead in our distribution system. And that's really how I got involved locally. And that's how I connected with Paul, who I'll let introduce himself now, who's been working on this issue here for a very long time. And together with a large coalition that we hope you'll join, we've been really trying to grab this opportunity to finally get the lead out of our distribution system and make our water safer. Paul?
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, good morning to all of you, and thanks again. I have never been an ANC commissioner, but I valued working with my ANC 4B commissioners, and I live in Tacoma, DC. I've been here for a little over 20 years. And I was formerly the National Water Policy Coordinator for a national environmental group called Clean Water Action. And 10 years ago, I left them because of our large lead and water poisoning crisis in the district that happened between and 2004, to work with communities, disproportionately affected communities around the country, to make sure that our voices were at the center of policymaking and implementation around lead water issues. That's something called the Campaign for Lead-Free Water. And I continue to be really focused like a laser locally, because we've had almost no redress to our issues, effective redress to our issues in Washington, D.C. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And I'm really looking forward to the question and answer phase and the discussion phase of this, to hear what tools and information you need or you have to teach us, and look forward to working with you in the future.
So what we're going to do today is go through very briefly some of the history of lead in water in DC, and some ideas about what can be done to fix that, because we're really at an important period right now when we have perhaps at least the funding to do to really address this issue in a way it hasn't been addressed previously. So first of all, you may have some questions about what really is a lead service line. The water that you get from DC Water comes through the water mains, which for the most part are not lead, but the service lines run from the main lines into your house. And they are sometimes and frequently made of lead. Originally, they were installed as lead. Now, some of those have been replaced and some of them have not been, but there are still tens of thousands of lead service lines in the district. And then there are another tens of thousands of lines where they don't know whether they're lead or not. And so there needs to be really a survey to determine exactly the scope of this problem. But we know that it's very, very big. And all of the water that you drink, the water that you use every day, the water that you cook with, all of that comes through those lead service lines. And some of the lead then can leach out into the water, either in just small particles or even larger particles. And so there's a real danger for all of us as we drink our water that it may contain lead. And there's really no safe level of lead in the water. So you have to do something to extract the lead from the water, or you have to prevent it from getting in the water in the first place. And so I'm going to let Valerie describe a little bit more about what the problem is with lead in the water, and then Paul will pick up on other issues as well. But maybe Paul should go first. I think Paul was going to talk about the lead in the water and the impact that it has.
Okay, great. Thanks, Randy. Lead is a neurotoxin, and lead is passed along through generations, from mother to daughter, and so on through the body. Of course, lead comes from paint, soil, and dust, but in DC, lead in water is also a primary and additive source. Even in small amounts, lead is not acceptable. So the unenforceable standard for lead under the lead and copper rule is 0. That's the health standard. And lead is dangerous for developing brains, but even and is most serious for fetuses and for young children, but it's a serious problem for all age groups. For those of us who are older, it impacts things like our hearing, it impacts cardiovascular systems, renal, and many, many other. Lead gets to every organ. So lead is a real problem in the individual health of people in DC. And in terms of the collective health, lead is associated with problems like the school to prison pipeline because of the decrease in IQ, the homicide rate, and all sorts of other social and factors across the city. Lead is implicated. So I'll pass it along to Valerie, who's going to talk about sort of the moment that we're in and why we're putting out an urgent call to you to engage with us even at this late date.
Thanks, Paul. And I share Paul's enthusiasm for the question and answer portion of this. We really do want to hear from you about what your concerns and your constituents' concerns are and how we can all collaborate. A couple of years ago, the general manager of DC Water made a commitment to get all of the lead lines out of the system in 10 years, but we've seen a troubling lack of progress towards that goal. And we also have been told, and we see that the funding is a major barrier. Right now, with the federal dollars that are coming towards DC, that are earmarked for infrastructure projects, including lead. Lead is a perfectly appropriate, removing lead pipes is a perfectly appropriate use of those funds. We do have a chance to solve that problem, to encourage gently DC Water to finally make good on that commitment and to actually get the lead pipes out. So what we're looking for is a commitment to get the lead lines out in 10 years and to use the recovery dollars, the American Rescue Plan dollars, among other sources, such as an infrastructure package that is going to be sending, if it passes, money to DC to get the lead lines out. Several council members made a request of the mayor for $350 million to remove lead service lines. We support that. We think that that's more than sufficient to tackle this problem. And we would love to collaborate with ANC commissioners throughout the district to finally make that a reality and put in place a transparent and equitable, actionable plan to finally tackle this problem. I think we'd all be happy to discuss any pieces of this, but what we really want to hear from you is where would more information and more clarity be helpful, and have a general discussion about collaborating on this work. So I'll pause there, but I'm happy to go into more detail on any piece of this, and I know my colleagues are as well.
And just one point about the timing for this request. The mayor's budget is supposed to go to the council on May 27th. So she's in the process right now of finalizing that budget. That's why it's very important for us to get the word out to her and her staff as quickly as we can, and then ultimately to the council too. But the federal government is going to provide some guidelines on May 10th, and then they'll be finalizing the use of that federal money between May 10th and May 27th. And so we really need to get in the process of developing that budget as quickly as we can. And that's why ANC 34G passed its resolution. I sent it out to everyone that can be sort of a model for other ANCs to adopt. I know some other commissions are thinking about writing letters to the mayor on this, but whatever we can do to try to influence the development of the budget is going to be really critically important. So we'll turn it over. Any questions that any of you had? Gerald, Jeremiah, or Connie, any questions about the problem or the proposed solution?
I do have a question, which is what has been done about the scope of the problem? I mean, Randy, you did say that it's not clear. So if the general manager of DC Water has said that they're going to solve this problem in 10 years, how do they know what the scope of the problem was if this promise and this commitment was already made? It's really befuddling to me that this study hasn't even been done. What can we do to accelerate that? That's really important.
Can I make a quick comment on that?
Sure.
Yep.
On everybody's water bill, it identifies whether or not they are lead service lines. So DC Water already knows the extent of the problem, and it's by whoever gets a bill, it's somewhere on that bill. I know because I had to look into it once, and it tells you whether or not you have a lead service line. And also, I think they have a map that you can go to, and that map will tell you whether or not your house is affected. I did want to make a as Commissioner Speck knows, I can't talk, so I'm going to try to cut myself. A clarification: the mains are mostly cast iron, and particularly out in the area where I am, but some of them date back to the 1920s. We've just had a series of replacements, and there's a replacement ongoing right now that I will mention in a second. But there's the main, there is the line from the main to the meter, and then there is the meter to the residence. Here's where the problem becomes. DC Water will embrace doing from the main to the meter. The problem becomes the meter to the residence. And that cost can be between $6,000 and $10,000. Most people out where I live, including myself, we can't afford that. So today is Saturday, right? I think it was Thursday, the mayor, my council member, and DC Water all got together at 28th and Douglas Street Northeast to announce this money that was coming to improve the quality of the water in the city. Of course, many of us were not invited. We did become aware of it, but I had another commitment that involved ANC money, so I could not be present. But I do know that it was a very quietly couched assembly. And I also remember that there was a message saying that only credentialed, pre-credentialed media were invited. So this is a problem for DC Water. DC Water claims it can't foot the bill on its own. I appreciate the resolution urging them to address the issue because you have the money and don't redirect it to something else. Those are my comments.
Well, Commissioner, that is a veritable highlights reel of a lot of different issues that we can dive into. So I'll try to tackle just a couple, and I know Paul's going to have a lot of good insights on these too, because he's got so much. He can do the current stuff, but he's also got a lot of deep history on a lot of these issues. So I see you're very knowledgeable about this issue, and I'll just start with the bill. It's definitely a good step that when they have either a confirmed or suspected lead service line, they're putting it on the bill, but it's just a step. So I'll give my own house as an example. That map is a good start, but there really needs to be a more comprehensive survey. So at my house, you'd think at this point, they'd have a little flag on me, but they apparently don't. It's been listed as 3 different materials over the past 5 years. And I can guarantee you nobody's been in there to verify anything, except for me. I've been in the basement trying to figure it out. So there is still, that's just one example, but that is emblematic of how, a lot of these are estimates, but they don't make that clear that it's a guess. They don't contact the homeowner when they're changing the listed material. So if you do see on your bill that there is a lead service line, it's definitely something to take note of, and you might want to filter, you do want to filter your water at least, but I wouldn't urge anyone to take too much comfort in what the material does say on the map unless it's been confirmed as copper. And Paul might have something to add there.
There are also on the map, there are a large number of residences and other connections, maybe apartment buildings or whatever, where it's unknown. It lists on the map as being unknown what the material is. And that's close to 30,000 connections. And so there's a substantial number out there that they simply do not have information on.
And then I was just gonna say one more thing and then turn it over to you. You did hit the nail on the head in terms of one of the centerpieces of what we're asking for, which is full pipe replacement at no cost to homeowners, because we know in addition to the historic reasons that those pipes are there that are not the homeowner's responsibility, we know from research, some of it conducted right here in DC, that when the homeowner bears responsibility for replacing, for the cost of replacing the pipe, that the results are highly inequitable. And that it doubles down on burdens, and it doesn't work out in a way that's fair, and it doesn't work out in a way that protects vulnerable people. So in what we're asking for is to replace the entire pipe at no cost to homeowners. And you're absolutely right that that's within reach with the amount of money that DC Water is getting right now, and with the amount of additional funds that we think they can get if we together act and ask the mayor to take care of this. Paul, I know you'll have a lot to say on those topics.
Okay, so Connie and Jeremiah, I think you both raised a couple of really trenchant points. According to DC Water's numbers, they have 30,000 known full or partial lead service lines across the district. When you look at the worst case scenario with the unknowns and not knowing what the materials are, there could be upwards of 60,000 lead service lines in the District of Columbia. And there's a lot of numbers being thrown around. We don't know until we actually do a real, what's called material survey, those are. Sometimes that requires digging something called a test pit to go in and actually look, and that costs money to do, right? So even knowing, as you said, Connie, sort of where and what the problem is, we have a sort of overall understanding from old paper records kept in the basement to mathematical models that have been done based on some assumptions about how old the houses are, or what developers said when they were putting in a section of the city. But the real thing is we don't really know all of the information. We're better than some cities, and at least we have an interactive map. That's a start. But as Valerie said, it's not always right. We have false positives and false negatives in terms of the materials. And Jeremiah, what you brought up about the cost in particular is really critical. Valerie talked about the inequity of putting the burden on people. One of the problems that we're facing is that a lot of water utilities, including ours, decided to make this artificial distinction between the part of the service line or lateral that runs to the curb stop or to the private property line, and then the other piece that comes into the house. When it was laid as one pipe. And when you look at the gas line or the electric line, or if you're old enough to have a landline telephone, all of those, the different utilities have some either ownership or control over, and for health and safety reasons can do work. What the DC Water has done is they said, due to the Fourth Amendment and private property rights, we don't have the ability to deal with that. Other cities like Pittsburgh, Newark, Flint, East Lansing, Michigan, Detroit have all resolved those legal issues and are doing full pipe replacement or have done full pipe replacement. Right now, Newark is going through a 2-year period to replace all of their service lines. So this is something that we can do. We think that it's a small cost. It's not a small cost in terms of the actual dollars, but it's a small cost relative to the other programs that DC Water is spending money on, whether it's main replacement, as you were talking about, Jeremiah, and that's where most of the reduced loan interest costs, which is the subsidy that we're getting from US EPA, where those dollars are going to. But it's a relatively small cost to do the service lines. I'll add one other thing, which is that what the science indicates is that if you have a full impact lead service line, you are twice as likely to have elevated levels of lead in the blood. If you have a partial service line, of which there are more, tens of thousands more, of which were created in the early to mid 2000s by DC Water, you're 4 times as likely to have elevated lead in your blood. And in a peer-reviewed retrospective study done by Dr. Dana Best of Children's National Hospital, she showed that we had, after the high spike of lead, we had a 37% increase in fetal death and across the district. And we had upwards of 42,000 kids elevated levels of lead in all 8 wards of the district. And so this is the time right now to rectify that historic mistake. We were 20 to 30 times more lead than Flint, Michigan coming out of our taps. And we had the largest recorded lead poisoning of any community in the United States to this point at that time. And we've had effectively almost no fixes. In fact, arguably, our water authority spent a lot of our rate dollars and tax dollars to make the problem worse by doing partial pipe replacement. So it's incumbent on them from a moral and ethical perspective and from an equity perspective to join with us to get the mayor to program some of this federal funds, this manna from heaven that's coming down to address the situation.
Paul, will the $350 million cover the 60,000 potential? Like you said, it's double what DC Water predicts. Will
So,
that 350 million cover that? Is that enough money?
so that's a really good question. And my answer to that is that DC Water, in an oversight that we just had a few weeks ago in front of HA and the Transportation and Environment Committee, was claiming then that it would be $1.3 billion to fix what? Valerie, you want to say?
1.4 billion. You're off by $100 million.
I'm off by just 100 million there.
Just a rounding error.
1.4 billion, but we think that's a estimate from what we've seen in other cities of the average cost, and it's a different cost for each property or for each block because of how far away, what the length of the lead line. But we think if they did a block by block approach with that money, they could drive down the cost by having the plumbers all lined up ahead of time and all the machinery, and being able to do the work with the commissioners to line up the neighborhood to understand what it is that we're facing ahead of time and have those conversations about what needed to happen. What we know from other communities is folks have been able to drive down the cost through those types of agencies and also through other innovative approaches. And it's also an opportunity to do some hiring and training and workforce development in our communities. You can, this is a very conventional Green New Deal, green jobs program that would not only advantage potentially of some federal largesse, but also pump that money back into our local economy. The answer to your question, Connie, is we really don't know. We know that $350 million is a good chunk of change that would get us going in the right direction. And I think in any case, no matter how much money we have allocated to this, we're going to have to learn as we go along what the nature of the problem is, whether it's bigger or smaller. This is one of those problems that I say has simplicity. On the surface, it's very simple. Lead is bad, we need to get it out. And then as you get into the layers of the onion, the science and the public policy questions and the implementation all require some thought. And we will need all of you and the citizenry here in Washington, D.C. to be doing oversight and participating, from the street level up to the boardroom of DC Water and to the council, to make noise and to share our lived experience as this rolls out. And Gerald, you had something you wanted to add to the conversation since we hadn't heard from you.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. I didn't want to be a distraction. Some time ago, the DC Water had a campaign to have people test their water for lead. I think I remember having a plastic bag that I put on the front porch and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So was there any result to that was known, or?
Well, let me just address that first and then ask Valerie and Randy to weigh in. From 2001 to 2004, DC Water conducted over many thousands of tests like that of people's water, because they were trying to get out from having to replace lead lines by finding lines that tested under 15 parts per billion. And what ended up happening is that they came up with 4,000 tests that were above 15 parts per billion, including 5% that were in the hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of parts per billion. And they covered up for 2.5 years those results, and residents figured it out and leaked it to then Ward 1 Councilmember Graham and the Washington Post, and that's where the cover-up got exposed. Since that time, there has been lots of testing at homes. Unfortunately, what the tests are deficient in two ways. One is that they just test the first liter or two of the water, and that doesn't necessarily give you the highest amount of lead that's in the water. And the second thing is that there is an understanding by the public that if your test is under 15, your water is okay. And that 15 standard isn't a health-based standard. It's a standard used by the system when they do a testing every few years to take a look at whether they're adding the right chemicals to keep the water less aggressive or corrosive. And what we know and is that it a lot of testing to find out for any one tap whether there's lead there. So you can be 0 one day and at 100 parts per billion the next, or vice versa, because lead releases variably. If you think about Russian roulette, and you only have one bullet when you turn the chamber, you're lucky if you get no bullet for 5 of the times, but time you'll get one. So that's how lead works. We have lead particles, as Randy was saying early on, chunks of lead that can have astronomical amounts of lead levels in them. And we have dissolved lead like sugar in coffee or tea. And those types of lead aren't present at the same amount over a day or a week or a month or a year. So lead testing is not a very good indication of safety. If we have lead lines, that's the best indication that we have a real problem in our home. The way I like to describe it is, has anyone here ever had a pixie straw with sugar in it? So these lead service lines are like 100% lead pixie straws going into our house. That's what we're looking at.
Well, the cover up.
Oh, go ahead.
The cover was, am I muted?
No.
You're fine.
The cover up was certainly successful in my case. I was unaware of it. But then I was also unaware that we are tearing down the swimming pool we just built out at the East Potomac Golf Course because they misjudged the water table of a building on the river. I find that phenomenal. Anyhow, the question I had is about this money that we hope, I see where we're headed with our advocacy here. We hope to have the money used in fashion. 2 questions. One is this real money or is this kind of a favorable loan program?
Which money?
The money that we're hoping to get from the federal government to replace these lines.
Real money.
Okay, thank you. Because there's been a lot of talk lately about how we were going to get a favorable loan.
There's a number of different programs, but between them, it's possible to get this money in a way that's not a loan. Water costs are an equity issue, and none of us want to do this on the backs of higher bills. So if you look at the way that DC Water is allocating and trying to pay for this, there is a way to do it that doesn't result in higher bills. And these federal dollars are not the only avenue, but they're a really important and relatively straightforward way of doing it.
So, and you can see I'm thinking in terms of advocacy here. Are there alternative uses for this same money?
Sure. Yeah.
Competing with it?
Yeah, there are a number of things that it could be used for, but lead service lines are specifically called out in legislation and in the discussion.
So I, for some reason, could not download the something from the mayor that Randy sent out. I could do the others, but I couldn't do that. So I don't know what the mayor has said so far about.
I think that was a letter from council to the mayor that for some reason that
was the letter you
yeah,
made.
that particular PDF has been giving a number of computers a little bit of heartburn, but it's a letter from several council members requesting that the mayor follow the legislative mandate. And the president talked about lead service lines the other day, talking about just requesting that this be a priority because of the ongoing harm.
Obviously, this is exceedingly timely. So I appreciate your bringing it to our attention.
Well, we need your help because, Paul, we've really hit on a number of the, as I said earlier, highlights reels of where there's been misinformation or confusion. And so what we really do want to hear, are there other things that you all are hearing? What information can we provide or resources can we provide, and how can we move together? Because it is really time sensitive, Randy.
And Robin has joined us. Maybe Robin, you could introduce yourself and say what ANC you're from, et cetera.
Morning, Robin.
Oh, well, there you go.
Robin, can you hear us?
You're on mute still.
She's off mute now, I think. Well,
Okay.
I did speak to Robin the other day. She's a new commissioner in Ward 2, and she's just beginning to learn about some of these issues, but we talked about it briefly the other day.
Well, I do see that with the addition of Commissioner Robin, we, in one way or another, have 7 of 8 wards represented. And I think that that is a really powerful statement if we can come together and, coalesce around a resolution like Randy's resolution or any sort of action. I think it would go a long way. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I think that it is powerful when folks can come together from across the district like we're doing right now.
Randy, for other issues, we've been, commissioners have signed on, to letters and so forth. I think it's really important. My daughter was born in 2002 when this whole thing came up, and the reporter of the Washington Post is a friend of mine, actually, who reported the issue and then reported the cover up. And I was so shocked and I was so dismayed that something as large as this that affects all of us wasn't taken care of right away, and then was indeed covered up. I was very disappointed, and that this has remained an issue for 20 years. This is wrong. I mean, it is wrong, and it really affects children. Every year our children go to school. We have to take them to the pediatrician, who has to, they have to get tested if we think that they're exposed, by lead. And I think that this is something that we have to do, and this is the moment. So for me, one suggestion would be an information sheet for residents. I think maybe even a petition for residents is really important, for everyone to be made aware again that it's not been solved, and that so many of us have put filters in our homes, as well as Deer Park water. I had that delivery for years, and that's an environmental issue. I don't think we should be bringing water in from elsewhere. I mean, we should trust that the water when we open the tap is okay. And then I also learned that if you boil water, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
I mean, these were things that, as I learned, I got increasingly more upset, but I didn't know what to do. And I think now we actually can take action. And with the president saying, this is an infrastructural issue, it is. This is the moment, okay, for an equitable fix. It should not be incumbent upon the homeowners to change it. Are you kidding me? People can't afford to make this change. And I would add, the other day, a neighbor across the street, they changed their line. It was done in like 2-3 hours. It was fast. But I thought, wow, if other people could have taken advantage of that on the block, we just would have done it right away. And then we go block by block by block by block and just get this done. This is what government is for. What else does government do? This is what should be done. So we have to exhort people, get the residents aware that this problem is not fixed. They should know. We should really push for a real understanding of we know that these areas have lead lines, these we don't know, but let's fix the ones we do know and study the ones we don't know, and then have a schedule. It should be a complete plan in place so that people feel safe and we know when it will be done. And honestly, 10 years is a long time to wait. I wish it were done immediately. So if we don't start now, it's just going to be even more delayed. And this is just wrong. So,
Connie, my daughter is 15 years younger than yours, and I remember holding her down at the pediatrician while she screamed while they took the blood sample. And our kids are what we're testing rather than taking the pipes out. And it's unacceptable.
Yeah, it is absolutely unacceptable. And we know the detriment to health. We know this. This is a fact. And we're not talking about it now because there's so many other things, of course, that we're dealing with in the nation's capital. But this is a long-standing problem that has not been fixed. And I don't have any trust, honestly, of DC Water. I still don't trust them because of this cover-up. It's like, how do you trust? I mean, it's very difficult to come back to believing what people say. So we need to have verification. We need almost third-party verification of what they say they're doing is correct, and that we, step by step do it. And I think none of the wards, all of the wards should be involved in making this happen. It has to happen.
Let
So
me-
whatever I
Connie,
can do, whatever I
one
can
thing,
do.
Connie, that would really help is, whatever happens with this moment, and we hope we secure the money. If we get the money, this is just the beginning because of the things you said about transparency and accountability and the need for the citizenry to be involved in oversight and to have an official role doing that. In Michigan, they passed a set of statewide regulations that sets up citizen councils to do oversight. And I think we ought to learn from the level of distrust that people have in Michigan for their government. I think, we need to assist the city council and the mayor who have sort of not had their eyes on this ball over the last 20 years to make sure that this semi-independent authority, DC Water, that's rebranded itself as Water is Life, but hasn't, done the job. From my opinion, in my opinion, we need to ride herd. If Newark can get the pipes out in 2 years, if other cities like Lansing, based on our problem, got their pipes out in 10 years, we can do this. This is a soluble problem. This is one of the contaminants that we can actually pronounce. We know that there's a problem. So we'd like to enlist you and everybody on this call to be part of the, the citizen force that engages. Jeremiah.
Quick observation, actually two, and then a question. Where the mayor had her announcement, and actually Congresswoman Norton was present, to my surprise, but federal money, whatever. So they just, in an area of where I live, which was previously called Avalon Heights, near the Bladensburg bus garage. So they've done all of these water main replacements, right? And it's an ongoing problem. I think we're like in the 4th week of it. And they've been very good about telling us where they're working and what delays, if they have it because of weather and da-da-da-da-da. But at the same time, they didn't replace the service lines. So that means that they're going to have to go back and dig up the streets again to do the service lines. Now, I understand this new technology, how to feed a copper line inside the lead, whatever, and da-da-da-da-da. I'm not going to get into all that, how I get solved. My concern is, and I'm going to say the executive, because she doesn't like to be called Madam Mayor anymore. She wants to be the executive. I'm pretty surprised that the executive, who is now a new mother, would stand in a place where this work is going on and laud the money and not say that it's going to address that problem specifically where the work is going on right under her feet. So,
Well, Jeremiah, can I add one thing to what you said, which is that when important work like replacing service lines are done, as you said, mains are done, the service lines should be fully replaced. But when they go in and do, whether it's sewer work or stormwater work, or they're replacing the main for our potable drinking water delivery, there's peer-reviewed science that shows within a 5-block radius, the shaking creates physical disturbance in everybody's home and shakes off lead particles into the water. Now, that's going to be different for each home. And some of that could be industrial levels of lead going into people's water supply. But that type of education and transparency and notification based on the science is one of those types of details that have not been part of the plan for DC Water when they do infrastructure work, whether it's the service lines or the mains or the sewage collection system, whatever that is, right? Or whether there's just a new house being developed or heavy trucks moving down the road. That's the type of stuff that we want to arm you with so that we can make sure that good policy and good implementation follows all over the District of Columbia, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from what's out there. But you're on point, Jeremiah, in raising the issues that you've raised. And your voice in saying these types of things is going to be critical in moving the discussion forward. You know, the Washington Post says, when I talk to them, they say, well, it's not news in DC to talk about lead and water. That happened 20 years ago. And Connie, as you noted, they did really good coverage. They had 200 articles in every section of the newspaper except for the obits, and that would have been indicated. But we've had collective amnesia, they think, and it's time, right, to say it's time. So thank you.
Well, my last comment, then Commissioner Speck said, now I can shut up. I do know that there is a regulation in place that says that if there is a new residence being built or a substantial renovation to a residence, which will affect the connection to the main, then the lead service line has to be replaced. It's required.
Mhm.
And I don't know how well that's monitored. I just know that the house across the street from where I live was built in 1917. They demolished as they say, quietly demolished the existing and put up a new residence. But as part of that new residence, they did actually tear up the street and replace the service lines all the way to the house.
Mhm.
Now, what's more concerning is the 5-block radius for people who were disturbed unknowingly.
Mhm.
So I agree with you that the campaign for awareness needs to be initiated immediately, and that this cost should not fall back on ANCs to use their funds to put out the message. This should come from whoever in the executive agencies is responsible for making sure this water issue is being taken. And I will, when I get off of this call, I will call my MOCR for Ward 5 and put it on her radar. And if it goes on her radar, then it goes up to the executive.
Well, one place to put the pressure on is at DOEE. And Tommy Wells, the director of DOEE, is also chair of the board of DC Water.
Well, he was there. Surprisingly, he was there at that presentation. So
well, and he should be the one who initiates and carries forward this issue, because it's really important for as an environmental issue in the district.
Thank you.
There's also a hearing on May 3rd that we should put on folks' radar. And I want to hear from Robin.
Awesome. Sorry about my audio. I'm moving away from my computer because for some reason my sound isn't working. I must have entered the call with some device that's causing my sound not to work. But I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. My name is Robin Nunn. I'm an ANC 2B03. I'm a new commissioner. I'm elected and sworn in January. My commission is really excited about this resolution and this proposal. So I'm fairly certain, based on our discussions last week, that we'll be passing a resolution because we've already kind of been able to determine that we have enough commissioners in support. A few of the comments that came up may be along the lines of what you've already discussed before I joined the call. I think what we're going to add to our proposal is to highlight, based on what we found on the DC Water site, some places in our 2B area where there are supposedly, lead pipes in existence to show to Councilmember Pinto and others, the importance of this for Ward 2. Some others on the commission pointed out some recent articles. I think there was an article maybe a couple days ago that DC Water is getting an EPA loan for $150 million to replace many of the water mains in the district. It seems like now is really the right time to encourage DC to be as expansive on this as possible and just finish the job. Someone else on the in the 2B commission also pointed out that 6 months ago DC Water had gone around on several blocks in T Street and replaced some lead lines. They even replaced, I guess, some of the meters into the residents at no cost, but there wasn't enough funding to cover all of it. So there are still a lot of properties in 2B that were not replaced. So it's too expensive, obviously, to ask residents and property owners to do it themselves. So this resolution looks like the right idea right now. So thanks for bringing this up.
And
sorry for
Robin,
joining late.
we are recording this meeting, and so I'll be distributing the video, so your commissioners can look at the whole thing and you can see the part that you missed.
Excellent.
Valerie, you
Perfect.
mentioned the meeting, the roundtable that Councilmember Che is holding on May 3rd. It's my understanding that's been narrowed somewhat now, that the focus is going to be primarily on the current very piecemeal program that provides some subsidies, a very small amount of subsidies for a few people to replace lead lines, but it's not going to focus on the bigger issue, which they're going to wait for and discuss, I think, at a meeting in June, after we know what the federal contribution is going to be and what the mayor's budget is going to be. I think that's their plan right now.
I think the first ask is definitely, organize, contact the mayor. We need this to be a priority, but there are these upcoming opportunities for council and others to hear from this group that any meeting about lead needs to be comprehensive, and that now is the moment to get all the pipes out.
Are there any
Okay.
questions or calls for tools that people have?
Well, I really appreciate all of you coming today, and pass the word in your commissions and to other commissioners in your area. Let them know that this is a really important issue that needs to be addressed now. And we'll keep you informed about developments as they go along, because I'm sure we're going to need to continue to rally our constituents and our ANCs to support very strong action at this point. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Randy,
Thank you.
are you still having the evening meeting?
Yes,
Part two of this?
on Monday, yes,
Yeah,
at 7 o'clock.
I'll see if we can get some of my.
Okay, that would be great. That would be great.
Feel free to reach out to us as you're putting together your resolutions, or if you're getting questions from constituents or colleagues, we're available.
Well, I felt that Randy's email included a lot of information that could get us started. So I think.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we thank you all, and we're looking forward to getting this project off the ground and actually done. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Long.